So hi, Katie here again. So today I want to do another reaction video. It's about it's from the Sky News series discussion panel series called The Pledge, and it's on trans issues, and it's about trans women and trans girls in the girl guiding movement. So without further ado, let's proceed and watch the video.
Imagine the following. Dressed as a woman, I solemnly declare, I promise that I will do my best to be true to myself and develop my beliefs to serve the Queen and my community, to help other people, and to keep the guide law as a guide leader. Now, I've adapted the guiding code to make myself leader, and now, despite only self-identifying as a female, I'm good to go to take a bunch of girls aged 7 and above on trips where I'll help supervise their sleeping, showering and toilet routines. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, I mean, like right from the start, this guy here, Nick Ferrari, he's the person who chairs these discussion segments in Sky News. And I mean, as you can, there's actually nobody in this discussion is actually trans. So this is again a room full of cis people talking about whether trans people should have rights. You notice right from the start he kind of mocks trans women. He mocks the idea that self-ID is something that's genuine, you know. I mean, he gives the impression, he puts out the misinformation that self-ID is something that's really easy to get, you know, that any man can just fill a form online, as we saw in the video that I reviewed before, and that any sort of cishet man can, you know, fill out a form online and become a woman, and that's just not true. And again, like right at the end, he recycles another transphobic trope, that of the trans woman as a sexual predator. So yeah, so you can see now what the narrative is already, and I guess the jury's out now as to what the rest of the panel do. Will they be will they call him out on this? Will they be supportive of trans rights? What's going to happen? So let's proceed further.
And when it became a major safeguarding concern for two leaders, they were expelled by Girl Guiding, and it's possible their packs will close down. This group think that means all trans rights trump just about everything else is plain wrong. I'm all for support and for understanding, but these leaders are misguided in every sense of the word.
Misguided. Worst dad joke ever. Well, like we can clearly see here now, he's talking about a news item that was in the news about 2 or 3 years ago, where two cis female scout leaders who were TERFs, who were transphobic, gender critical, basically trans exclusionary radical feminists, whatever you want to call them, they were transphobic, and he's trying to sort of say that you know, he's from the start he's not being honest about this, and he's just trying to frame a discussion where two women were concerned about the possibility of predatory men entering a safe space, particularly for female children, and so he's already set things up, and then with that awful kind of like corny dad joke right at the end, you know, I mean, it's, you know, right at the end of his, you know, presentation of this discussion, the preface of this discussion, I should say, that kind of like shows you where this is going. So anyway, and also you see the disclaimer, I'm not transphobic, you know, but I'm not transphobic, but they are transphobic. So let's continue.
I was curious about how you were going to deal with this topic, because I know it requires extreme sensitivity.
I'm always
obviously
your man.
you are the
I'm always
perfect
your man.
candidate to raise it. This is a really difficult topic because you're balancing rights.
So this first panelist is Afua Hirsch, and she's a journalist. She's written in The Guardian and other kind of British newspapers. I believe that her training is in, she's been trained to be a barrister though, so she has like a legal training, but she decided to go into journalism instead. She also went to a single-sex girls' school. So you'll find this with a lot of people in the UK establishment. They will either have gone to single-sex schools. That's how it works over here in the UK. Most, particularly in journalism, and particularly this sort of journalism where it's kind of not local journalism, but it's like national journalism, like the big papers and the big media companies. A lot of them come from like what we call public schools or private schools, you know, kind of boarding schools. I don't think she went to a boarding school, but she went to single-sex school. And my theory is that because a lot of the people, the British establishment, come from, you know, were brought up at single-sex schools, they find it a lot more difficult to actually kind of accept trans people. You know, that's my theory, because I find a lot of people who aren't like a lot of like working class people, like most of us, they're fine with it, and as are a lot of middle class people who went to kind of, you know, what you call co-educational schools, where you have boys, girls, non-binary people, you know, trans, cis, etc. So yeah. So anyway, I won't rabbit on. Let's see what Afua has to say. And bearing in mind, Afua is the kind of token liberal here, so she's a lot more liberal than the other panelists on this discussion. So anyway, let's proceed further.
You're balancing rights on both sides, and on the one hand,
and safety, I would say.
am very concerned about the rights of trans people who have experienced huge discrimination, and I think this whole conversation about making it easier for them to be recognised in the gender they're transitioning into is that in the past, the experience of wanting to transition was very invasive and required all kinds of unreasonable things. On the other hand, I'm also highly conscious of the concerns of women worried about anyone who chooses to self-identify with no checks and balances, kind of walking into women's only spaces.
Yep.
And the government's consulting on this at the moment, and there have been a few things happening. For example, these outside ponds in Hampstead Heath where people go swimming, said that anyone who self-identified as a woman could go into the women's pool, and then they changed their minds because it meant that some women weren't comfortable swimming there anymore. So I think it's a really difficult issue. I think you've slightly simplified what's going on with guiding, because it's not just about guide leaders, it's about the children as well.
But it's about safeguarding, I thought.
It's about safeguarding. Safeguarding children is non-negotiable. It's the most important thing.
So if two women who do it, if they have safeguard, respectfully, they probably know more than you or I.
So I agree, but I think if you look at what Girl Guiding are saying, they are saying that they didn't dismiss these women who raised concerns because they raised concerns, but because they were doing things on social media that were intimidating others, that they went public, you know, that they hadn't conducted it in line with their
Before I bring others
code.
in, and I know this is sometimes it's cheapens the but I'll bring Phil in next, but you have a daughter.
I do.
Would you be happy with your daughter going off on some kind of girl guiding trip, should she become a girl guide, with a bloke who's self-identifying?
I would want to know that Girl Guiding have done proper safeguarding. Putting a group of girls with a man, somebody who is physically a man, without doing proper safeguarding would be a huge concern. So I would want to know, and that's why I think this is a conversation. I don't think we have all the answers. But I'm very suspicious of anyone who says this categorically is the situation. A trans person can never work with girls in a guiding context, or a trans child who was born a boy can never be part of Girl Guides. I think that we need to be open to the fact that this is the front line of a huge change in society, and we don't have the answers, but we need to be very sensitive.
Phil's champion at the bit.
Well, there is a lot to unpack there. I mean, yeah, Afua Hirsch is the token liberal, but as you can see, I mean, she's still transphobic. I mean, this is typical of the UK. I mean, the left hate us as well. The liberals and the left hate us. The kind of more, you'd expect to be more intelligent, would be more intelligent normally, or more progressive. They also hate us. Like, as you see as well, born a boy, you know, a trans girl who was born a boy, and she thinks she's being liberal, see, like, that's actually really offensive, because trans girls and trans women were never born boys. We were assigned male at birth incorrectly assigned male at birth, and so that again, we were never boys, we were never male, we were never men, and you see as well a reiteration of the whole kind of safeguarding concern, you know, I mean, that sort of thing, and the bloke in a dress type of stereotype as well. And they talk about safeguarding of children, but there's no kind of mention there of safeguarding of trans children. That concept just doesn't enter their head, that trans children could be abused as well, or attacked, or even by other cis children, or by a cis adult, or these two women who, as Afua admitted, were doing stuff on social media. They belonged to extremist transphobic organisation, and they were like, you know, and that's why Girl Guiding kind of let them go, because Girl Guiding have a trans policy where they kind of welcome trans girls and welcome trans women to work within the Girl Guiding movement. And so, yeah, this is the thing we have in the UK, and that idea as well that you know, the idea that trans activists are trying to prevent legitimate debate, and you know, is that whole kind of framing it in those kind of terms. Yeah, it just shows you, like, that's just so typical of how things are in the UK at the moment. That just encapsulates the sort of situation in Turf Island. So yeah, so bearing in mind she was a Liberal, anybody who feels triggered by this, by the way, you know, I mean, if you don't want to be triggered anymore, please don't watch further, because this gets really, really horrible. So anyway, I'll proceed. Here are the less Liberal people.
This is a subject. I'm Mr. Confused, right, Mr. Confused on this one. It's a very complicated subject, but...
Okay, so before I go further, this guy is called Phil Campion, or Phil Champion, so I don't kind of remember how you pronounce his last name. He is ex-SAS, which is a kind of, well, I think most people know what the SAS is. It's part of the army. It's like a sort of kind of elite type of unit. You can see he's got his Who Dares Wins badge on his lapel. So I don't exactly know how he got into broadcasting or media, whether he's an author or not. There's a few SAS people have written books, so maybe that's why. But yeah, this guy is ex-army. So, yeah, anyway, I will proceed further.
There's a few things that I've brought out of this. One is, you know, the safety and safeguarding of the kids has to be paramount and has to be at the forefront of every argument. It trumps any gender, all right, the safety of my kids, any time. We're dealing with a minority fringe type of person who's, and it's always the minorities who've got the loudest voices, by the way, isn't it? You know what I mean? They're shouting and screaming.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Minorities, like, this guy comes across really as a bit of a right-wing extremist. You know, I know that he's probably not, but he comes across as somebody like a Tommy Robinson type person, or some sort of fascist, you know. I mean, I'm not saying he is, but he just comes across here starting to bang on about minorities having too much power and all that. And also he says this is a fringe minority, you know. So the fringe minority actually are the transphobes, because most people in this country aren't transphobic. Most people aren't obsessed with trans people and troll trans people relentlessly and kind of devote their lives to, you know, weaving elaborate conspiracy theories about a trans ideology that's being pushed onto children and trans people trying to take over the world and that type of thing. Most people in the UK aren't like that, but there's a minority of people in this country, a fringe minority, whose views are amplified, transphobic people whose views are actually amplified by historically transphobic media, and that's what we're seeing here. So yeah, so he's got a bit of a nerve to moan about minorities and fringe minorities and try and dismiss trans people who are just trying to live their lives, trans children who want to be in Girl Guiding, and trans adults who want to help young people in Girl Guiding. You know, he's got a bit of a nerve to then sort of like bang on about fringe minorities spoiling things for everyone else, because it's actually the other way around. It's those two guide leaders who are the fringe minority, who belong to TERF groups, who are obsessed with, you know, hating on trans people and don't want trans people to actually be allowed to contribute to society and to be a part of society, who wish that trans people would just go away and hide in the closet again, which is not going to happen. Okie doke, as we all know. So anyway, I will proceed further with Mr. Campion's analysis of this issue.
These trans, I'm going to say trans people because I don't really understand it fully myself properly. But what I will say in regards to the two girls that lost their jobs, okay, is that they are in an organisation which runs itself on discipline, and if they found themselves falling outside of that discipline, then they had to jog on anyway, didn't they? They had to move on.
If they feel that there's a safeguarding concern, is it not their duty to make that...
They've flagged it up, they've had that... I think it was more a case... It wasn't for the safeguarding concern, it was from the way they conducted themselves on social media.
Lastly, in your old game, if you're supplied with rifles that don't fire properly, isn't the duty of a soldier to say...
He would say it, and something would get done about it, of course it would.
Right, isn't that your duty?
But I'm not going up against policy.
Hang on. Just one moment. You were talking about safeguarding of children, and now you're talking about rifles and guns with children in the same kind of breath, you know? Just putting that out there. You know, you're talking about trans people and trans girls being a threat to children. Yeah, you're talking about guns now. And you're having your kind of little boy type of Alan Partridge type discussion with your mate Phil over here, you know, who used to be a soldier. I mean, come on.
But I'm not going up against policy.
What, even though they're giving you guns that don't fire?
This isn't the case. We're talking
All right.
about...
OK. I think sometimes employees have a duty. If they're worried about the safeguarding...
Yeah, they've said something. They have said something.
I don't know that they should
but they
lose
haven't
their
fallen in line... The way I've understood this is they haven't fallen in line. So they've had to move on for going against the grain in that respect.
I just want to bring my girl guiding statement in, just because... Do you mind, Majid, just because we've been talking about what girl guiding do, just very quickly. Just to explain very quickly what the girl guiding policy is, because they say if an adult self-identifies as a woman, then they're able to undertake all adult roles. Young trans members should be able to share accommodation with other young members if they wish. Members are entitled to use the facilities of the gender that they self-identify as, and it's not a requirement or best practice to tell parents that a trans person will be attending a residential event.
Very important we get a Majid.
Why? Why should somebody say, oh, a trans person is attending an event, a trans girl, oh, that person over there is a trans girl, you know, that girl over there is a trans girl, you know, do you really want to go ahead and let your children attend this event because a trans person's attending the event, particularly a trans child? That's just terrible, you know? I mean, like, it's like saying, well, you know, you wouldn't sort of say, like, for instance, like, I'm half Jewish. You wouldn't say, oh, by the way, Katie's half Jewish. Do you still want your children to attend this event, you know? It's just pure and utter discrimination. And it shows how the UK media establishment is on a totally different wavelength from the majority of decent, liberal-minded, progressive, you know, not even liberal-minded, just reasonable people who believe in fair play in this country. That is just terrible, and they don't even know how terrible it is. And this is what goes on at these dinner parties, this sort of dinner party transphobia, you know? Yeah, so I'm going on a rant about this because it's really is one of the videos that kind of gets me the most, you know? It really is, it gets to me the most. But let's hear what this gentleman has to say. Who I'm not sure who he is, but I think he's a journalist as well.
So the Girl Guides have issued a statement and they've said keeping girls, young women and our adult volunteers safe is our #1 priority. We're really proud of our robust safeguarding procedures which apply to everyone and underpin everything volunteers and girls do in guiding. We are deeply saddened that anyone would suggest that we would knowingly put our young members at risk. As an organisation, we pride ourselves on caring for every individual. Simply being transgender does not make someone more of a safeguarding risk than any other person.
Here. Well done, Girl Guiding. If there's anybody from Girl Guiding watching this video, I want to thank you on behalf of the trans community for your allyship, you know, for being steadfast allies. And it's people like you who give me hope during these times where the TERFs seem to be like taking over, and the transphobic lobby seem to be like gaining the upper hand in the upper echelons of government and the media. You know, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for being steadfast allies, and you can see what's going on. A lot of other people can see what the TERFs are trying to do, and their insidious kind of methods that they use to demonise trans people, but you are not having it. You can read between the lines, and that's what I believe the majority of people in the UK are not knuckle dragging fascists or knuckle dragging sort of kind of like, because they have like the upper classes, you know, like the media in this country, like they look down on the majority of people in the UK because they think that they're unintelligent, and that's why they're pushing this agenda onto the kind of ordinary people of the UK. But they forget the ordinary folk, you know, like the main kind of like the 99.9% of the British public. They will have trans friends, trans colleagues, trans children, trans parents. You know, they will have like cousins who are trans, they will have lovers who are trans, you know, and siblings and partners who are trans. So they forget this, and this is where they're going to lose, because most of us in this country, most people in this country know at least one trans person, and they can see that this is a load of hogwash, you know, that's being kind of peddled here by like the transphobic people in the media. So yeah, so anyway, let's see what this gentleman has to say. I think, unfortunately, he's a TERF, but here we go.
I think that, first of all, it's really important that we recognise that the debate does seem to get shut down very quickly. I'll give you one example.
Debate about people's existence, you know, debate about whether trans people have the right to exist. A debate, may I say, that is being carried out here without one single trans person in the room. Okay, just let that sink in. These are all cis people. They're discussing whether trans people have a right to exist in society, or whether we should be left out of society as outcasts. Yeah, okay.
Well, on the women's side, women who are concerned, and yes, it's very sensitive, there was a poster that went up, and the poster simply stated the dictionary definition of being a woman. It said woman, women, noun, adult, human, female.
Posy Parker. We all know about Posy Parker. Anybody who watches this channel knows about Posy Parker. She's, well, this is like a transphobic dog whistle. And I mean, Posy Parker, aka Kelly J. Keane, or Kelly J. Keane Minshall, Kelly J. Keane I think she goes by now. She, excuse me, she is transphobic, and she's so transphobic that the rest of the TERFs, the gender critical movement, have actually distanced themselves from her. Not least, you know, because of the fact that she sits down and makes friends with right-wing people, extreme right-wing people like Carl Benjamin, for instance, who was actually, I think he was thrown out of UKIP for being too right-wing, yeah. But also Carl Benjamin, who thinks that it's okay to tell a rape joke about a female MP, you know, and Kelly J. Keane, Posy Parker, who puts up this woman, adult human, female, kind of like these posters everywhere to trigger trans people and to make trans people feel unwelcome and unsafe, is claims to be, well, she doesn't claim to be a feminist anymore. But I was going to say, like, sitting down with somebody who thinks that raping a woman is funny, you know, how can she couldn't call herself a feminist anyway? And like, she has the cheek to blame a lot of attacks against women onto trans people. Yet she is sitting down with a man who thinks rape's funny, a cis het man who thinks raping a woman is suitable for like a joke, you know? So yeah.
Human, female. Yes, and there it is, right there. And what happened is that a person on Twitter complained. It was a doctor who's non-trans. He complained, and the company that put that up, Prime Site, apologised almost instantly, within hours, and they said that they promised to remove that poster because they didn't mean to offend. And so the debate has become too overly concerned with causing people offence and shutting down the natural concerns that some people may have. And all I'd say is that actually looking at this policy, the Girl guidelines have stated that when a person is 18 or over, it is unlawful to tell other people that they are trans unless that trans person has given you permission to do so, which makes sense on the face of it. What I would say, though, is if a parent is sending their female child to...
Whoa, it's not the Girl Guiding Policy per se. The Girl Guiding Policy is just abiding by the Gender Recognition Act, which says that once a trans person has a gender recognition certificate, it's against the law to actually out them as trans. So, for instance, if you're legally female, once you get a gender recognition certificate and your sex marker on your birth certificate is amended to female if you're a trans woman or male if you're a trans man, and anybody who that's confidential information, and anybody who outs you as trans then has broken the provisions of the Act, or whatever the legal jargon is for that, but they breached the GRA, they breached the Gender Recognition Act. So that is something that Girl Guiding has to abide by. Every organisation has to abide by that. So it's not something that Girl Guiding has made up itself. And as it happens, Girl Guiding is like obviously very sort of like an ally of trans people by the look of it. So all credit to them. They didn't have to go the extra mile to do that, but they have done it. And they are obviously outraged that people are picking on trans girls in the guiding movement and like trans women, trans adults who are in the guiding movement who are trying to help children. So yeah, so good on you, Girl Guiding. Good on you.
Way girls-only girl guides and not knowing that there's a male to female trans person responsible for supervising their, say, showering and their staying in tents. I'd say that parent, if they then subsequently find out, that they would have a natural concern to say, hang on, we didn't know that was the case. And because it's saying it's illegal to actually, for understandable reasons, out somebody, how is the parent meant to know? And you're taking their choice away as well, and that's why this debate has to happen.
Debate, again with a debate. It's not a debate. People's existence isn't a debate. I don't debate your existence as a cis person, so why do you feel that you have the right to debate my existence as a trans person? And I mean, like, showering, the risk of abuse, when an adult is looking after children. Well, actually, cis women can abuse children as well. Cis women can be paedophiles. And actually, the majority of, there are way more cis women who have been sort of caught for abusing children than there are trans women. But yeah, they're focusing on trans women, and this is just prejudice. This is just transphobia, just raw, blatant transphobia.
I want to bring you in after we hear from the woman. Phil, you mentioned her. This is the former guide leader, Helen Watts, who in a way is the whistleblower. Let's hear what she said.
The whistleblower is a TERF, by the way. Just saying that. But, they're a TERF. You just look this person up, they're a gender-critical transphobe. Yeah.
Despite no change in the law, membership of Girl Guiding is now based on the principle of self-identity. Boys who identify as girls are treated as any other girl when it comes to residentials. The trans girl, who still has the physical body of a boy and who the other girls may have known as a boy until recently, is entitled to use the same sleeping, changing and washing spaces as the other girls, if they choose, and the other girls are not given a choice.
So you see, you see the way that Sky News has sensationalised this by picking out those various those actual points there in the what this Helen Watts, who is a TERF, has said. Principle of self-identity, same sleeping, changing and washing spaces, not given a choice. So these are all kind of like dog whistles, really, to the person watching it. The Sky News are imagining a certain demographic of person watching their show, you know, and they're kind of playing up to that. They're playing to the gallery. Again, they're insulting the intelligence of the majority of British people who can see right through this crap. And yeah, and also like it isn't a change. The law has been changed because on the principle of self-identity, you can do a lot of things like, you know, you have access to female spaces already. As we said in the last video, the Gender Recognition Act has nothing to do with that. It's the Equality Act that has a bearing on that, and that's what protects trans people who want to use single-sex spaces. So yeah, so again, more misinformation, again typical of the UK media.
I just need to clarify that Helen Watson, the other guide leader, is saying that they were expelled due to blowing their cover or talking about safeguarding concerns as regards social media campaigns or whatever else. That is unclear. So just move on from that, and that is unknown. Were you a guide or a brownie?
No, it wasn't.
So this is Boris Johnson's sister. I can't remember her name now, but this is Boris Johnson's sister anyway. So.
I mean, I think we have to ask whether girl guiding is going to be allowed to call itself girl. I mean, after you're not allowed to put up a poster saying the definition, technical dictionary definition of what a woman is. How do we define girl as it now applies in girl guiding?
So again, more sort of transphobic dog whistles. Oh, you're changing our language. You can't. Girls aren't girls anymore. Well, that's actually what she's denying there. Boris Johnson's sister is saying she's actually denying that trans girls are girls and trans women are women. So yeah, so that's blatantly transphobic again, and more support for Posey Parker as well, as you see, who's an extremist and got far right links. So there we go.
It's not girls. It's just anyone who thinks
People
they
guiding.
It's
want
a
to be.
very complex, very sensitive
very
issue. How do you
complex-
steer a path through this, Rachel?
Well, what I think that the principle I would apply is I don't like these sort of absolutist positions that institutions are taking, of saying, you know, you cannot tell the children.
Why did you look at me when you said absolute?
I'd like to engage all eye contact to see if anyone wants to join in afterwards. It's called
I
hosting.
imagine my daughter, let's say, on a camping trip in the Brecon Beacons, and she is not told that actually the person who is looking after her is a trans woman, i.e. is physically a man. Now, I'm prepared to accept that children are much more across this whole trans movement than we are, we oldsters.
Another factor of another aspect of transphobic discourse in the UK is the attempt to make it a generational issue. So, for instance, they are trying to sort of say, oh well, you know, it's trans is a new thing. It's the young generation who are trans, and the older generation who are kind of against it. You know, but that's not true because older people are trans as well. Trans people can be of all ages, as can transphobes. But by making it a generational issue, then again it kind of masks the actual blatant transphobic prejudice. Yeah, so.
I still think it's quite confusing for children as well as for oldies like me and Phil. And I think it's wrong that you can't say to children, I think they're much more understanding than maybe we are.
So yes, so so it's actually Rachel Johnson, Boris Johnson's sister. I couldn't remember her name, but yeah, you notice at the end here that she says, like the clip I've just kind of shown now, she says it's confusing. You know, I think it's confusing for children. Well, this is a common tactic with transphobes in the UK. They'll turn around and they'll say, don't teach children about LGBT issues or being transgender, or, you know, give children the opportunity to come out as trans or LGBT, you know, overall, because they say it's confusing for them. They say, let kids be kids, you know. I mean, this is another thing they like to say, and it kind of like ties in a bit with what I was talking about, the generationism of the transphobic lobby. I mean, it's present in the trans activist groups as well, generationism, but here, I mean, the narrative they're trying to push here is that, younger people are coming out as trans, and they don't actually understand, you know, before they've actually understood, you know, what it is to be trans, and before, you know, the idea that they'll grow out of it, that this is somehow a phase they're going through, and then, you know, even more sort of perniciously, they then push the narrative that older trans people and the trans lobby is trying to indoctrinate young people and brainwash them into thinking they're trans, because they try to say that in the past, you know, before there was any information out there, you know, for trans kids, they would have grown up to be either like masculine women or feminine men, you know, like tomboys or kind of effeminate gay men. So they keep pushing this narrative to try and weaken the trans community's sort of, you know, case for advancing trans rights. So yeah, so this is quite, you know, a common tactic with them, yeah. But and if we proceed further,
By the way, Miss Jones used to be Gareth Jones, but now she's Miss Jones, and it's all fine. And then I think everyone can understand it.
What I don't understand with this as well is if you go back to that statement I read out from the girl guiding, and they say that simply being transgender does not make someone more of a safeguarding risk than any other person. That's true, but the same sentence could be said about boys and men. Simply being male doesn't make you more at risk of being a problem for safeguarding if you were to apply that logic, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, now this is interesting, because he's now saying that he's now saying that cis men are not automatically going to be paedophiles and sex predators, which is true. But the fact is that cis men are way more likely to be paedophiles and sex predators than either trans or cis women, you know. But he's just spent the whole of the debate actually trying to argue that including trans women in and trans girls in female spaces is going to put women at risk. So he's kind of contradicted himself there. But and also as well, he's kind of overblown the idea of the trans predator, when actually the statistics show year after year that it's cis het males who are way more likely to be sex abusers, sex predators, and generally violent and commit violent crimes. So yeah, it's kind of quite rich coming from him, considering what he's just said during the rest of the debate. So yeah.
And these people have still, one imagines if they're self-identifying, they still have biological male organs. And so what I'm asking and what I'm wondering is, if that is the case, then what's the purpose of separate sex organisations in the first place? If you're going to take that line, you might as well merge them, which of course leads to other concerns that other people have.
Mums and dads would be happy with that.
I just want to tell you what Stonewall says, because that's the charity for LGBTQI people who've got a strong position on this, and they say no child should face discrimination or bullying simply because of who they are. Refusing to include trans young people can have serious consequences for their safety and well-being, and is also breaking the law. It's really important that active steps are taken to create inclusive environments for all lesbian, gay, bi and trans people. I think in this debate we're focusing on the adult leaders, and I totally understand that, and this is a story about an adult leader who has left the guide.
No, you're not focusing on the adult leaders. You're also, right through this debate, they're also having a go at trans children and painting them as a risk, as a safeguarding risk. So not only are they having a go at trans adults, but they're also having a go at transgender children. Even they are not seen as being kind of out of below the belt, you know, as far as kind of attacking the trans community goes. So they will just as easily attack trans children, you know, which is kind of shocking, really. And that's how the transphobic lobby is in the UK, you know.
Unhappy about the situation, but this is also about the children, and that creates a real dilemma, because if you've got girl guides, you've got trans girls who want to be part of that. Leaving them out and saying they don't count as girls is really, really problematic. But then obviously them sharing spaces and washing facilities and,
Yes.
you know, for both sides, they might be very self-conscious about their bodies being different from the other girls. So it's really difficult, but I think we should I just want to say, I think we've got to think about, these girls are very vulnerable. Trans girls, trans children are extremely vulnerable. Discrimination, being excluded, they later have mental health problems, they have high risks of suicide.
Yeah.
It is very important to think, how can we get organisations like Girl
I'm gonna
Guides to
rip you off your
include
soapbox now.
them?
I'm sorry to bring you down in your prime, right? But seriously, I think if the way I'd leave this whole conversation is, so long as the safety of the kids is paramount and foremost in everybody's thing, then include as many people as you like, but just make sure those kids are safe, is what I'm saying.
Did you notice, as soon as Afua Hirsch started to talk about trans children being vulnerable, she was shut up and told to get down off a soapbox, you know? Which is quite interesting. And then this Phil Champion guy, pipes in to round off to say, as long as children are safe, in which, you know, I mean, you can tell he doesn't mean trans children, otherwise he would have let Afua finish what she was going to say. Because actually those statistics are right, those kind of, that picture of what it's like to be a trans child or a trans adult in the UK at the moment shows that we are a vulnerable group of people, you know. I mean, we needn't be, but unfortunately there's been a resurgence of transphobia. I mean, there's always been transphobia, but now there's a spotlight on us, and we're kind of almost like a punch bag for both the left and the right. So yeah, for different reasons, but that's the thing. I mean, and yeah, so please do tell me what you think of this video, and what your opinions are on it. I mean, feedback would be great. I mean, if you could, you know, if you want to leave some feedback, please leave some feedback in the comments below. And also, if you wish to subscribe, you know, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who's subscribed so far, you know, and thank you to people who have left comments on my videos so far. I really appreciate your input, and that's one of the things I find most rewarding about being on YouTube, is the fact that you get opinions from all sorts of different people and all sorts of opinions. I don't moderate my comments. I allow all comments. I've even had transphobic comments on here and comments about me, the way I look. I don't moderate comments at all on here. So, but yeah, as I say, you know, please do let me know what you think, you know, and thank you very much for watching, and I love you all. So for now, cheerio and stay safe.